Good morning, everybody. Good morning and welcome to Sunday service at Center for Spiritual Living, Pleasant Valley. I am Reverend Kelly Bershinsky. I welcome you on Facebook Live, here as well in person. And please join me in welcoming our friend and musical guest, Mr. Alberto Dalpino.
Favorite Irish composers, Turlo O'Carolan, and in the spirit of the community, Mr. O'Carolan wrote a lot of songs for his friends, and Mr. Charles O'Connor happened to be his best friend, and he wrote this wonderful jig in his tribute. So here we go with Charles O'Connor.
Wow, thanks, Alberto. And thanks again, everybody, for being here this morning. So appreciate your willingness to come out and join us here at the center. I want to take a moment and wish everybody who, any observers, wish best wishes for Rosh Hashanah and for High Holy Days. So all the best for this season for sure. So our last Sunday here for Finding Magic, right? That is our monthly theme for September, Finding Magic. Let's do this, since this is our final Sunday, let's do this affirmation together just right now if we can. I believe in magic because I see it every day. One more time, let's do that. I believe in magic because I see it every day. Oh, so is that true for you? Are you seeing magic? Are you keeping track? Are you looking for magic in your lives and that sort of thing? Fantastic, fantastic. So I will just make note of the fact that while this is the final Sunday, the final week of our theme, Finding Magic, it doesn't mean you have to stop looking for it or finding it in your own lives. So I think that would serve us all very well just to continue that process forever. And that magical process. For me, I'm finding magic right now in the little bit of weather change that I'm noticing, where the evenings in Camarillo are back to being really beautiful, wonderful, cool, beautiful Camarillo evenings. And based on where we've been in the last little while with heat and the heat waves and that sort of thing, that certainly feels like a degree of magic for me. And while that's true, it's also just beautiful to me to watch and to witness the changes, the change in seasons, the changes of cycles as we move from September and soon to be into October and that sort of thing. And so I really honor the seasons, and we'll change the clock soon. It'll be dark at an early hour and all those sorts of things, but I think we can enjoy all of that as well, welcoming all of those things. And so I have a special guest here today. You guys know her very well. And that is the Reverend Dr. Joyce Bennett Hall. She is going to be here. She's coming up to do our sacred ceremony, lighting the flames of faith. So please welcome with me, Dr. Joyce Bennett Hall.
Thank you. I'm a special guest. I love that. So we do perform this ceremony to promote the universal consciousness of life, which acknowledges that all peoples and all faiths, all sentient beings come from that one great universal presence, which we call spirit. Fundamental to this truth is the unifying nature of all religious thought and experience, which we honor here today. And I'd like, as I read these, maybe close your eyes, and instead of just listening in a rote fashion of all these different religions, just feel them in your heart and realize that we are all connected to the one source. We light a candle for the Tao, honoring the universal path of harmony and equilibrium, the natural way. We light a candle for the shamanic traditions, honoring the beliefs and practices of all indigenous peoples, the way of primal spirituality. We light a candle for Hinduism, honoring the path of knowledge, action, and devotion. We light a candle for Judaism, honoring the ethical path of living by sacred law. We light a candle for all forms of Buddhism, honoring the Four Noble Truths and the path of compassion. We light a candle for all forms of Christianity, honoring the Christ consciousness as the path of love. We light the candle for all forms of Islam, honoring the path of submission to the will of God as the highest calling. We light a candle for the religion of Baha'i, honoring the path of unity and peace. We light a candle for all forms of New Thought, honoring the metaphysical path of mental healing through the practice of universal spiritual principles. We light the candle for all those who are as yet unaware of the power and presence of spirit in their lives, and for the space that we are holding for them at this center, and for all religions unnamed in this ceremony. And as we light the healing candle, please put silently into the symbolic light the names of anyone you wish to have experienced the healing flame of God's eternal love. and keeping yourself in the place of serenity and peace and love. Let's go within. And what I absolutely know to be true is there is magic in this room. There's the magic of love and camaraderie and connection and friendship and a very high state of energy just permeating this room. And as I go deep within me, I go to a place where I know nothing is impossible. And this is the place where I am reminded who I am. I am energy. I am light. I am power. The same energy that keeps the planets in the sky and keeps the stars where they belong, who brings trees back after winter. The same energy that makes mountains and moves them. I am all of that, and so I know this for each person here and online. This is who I am, and this is who every other person is as well. I am here today to be reminded of that magic within me. I get this reminder from the music that I listen to from Alberta. Alberta's music is beautiful and it resonates within me deep because this comes from that same power, that same energy that is constantly moving and expanding and creating, waiting for each person to step into the power that is theirs to step into. So through the words of Kelly and the music from Alberta, and the friendship and camaraderie of this center, I know today's message and service is already done perfectly in the mind of God. And I release my word to law. Step aside, and please join me in saying, and so it is.
Thanks, Reverend Joyce. Again, right back to Alberto. Please just try to stay in that sacred space of prayer, of meditation, as he takes us deeper into music.
And this piece, it's called The Wise Maid. And it's, I find it a very haunting and spiritual at the same time feeling. So here we go, The Wise Maid.
Wow, I never cease to be amazed. I am in awe of your talent. It's really beautiful and a little jealous, also, if I might say. Uh, so, Dr. Joyce is going to come back up and share a little bit about her view on what magic means.
Well, I think you asked me to do magic, finding magic in communities. And, well, we have a community right here, and I see a lot of magic. And I'm sure you all feel a lot of magic because there's love in this room that's very thick. It's almost you can see it. It's an energy. And we're here to support one another and share in safety, and I think we all do that quite nicely. And as I thought about communities, there's communities all around the world. There's old communities, new communities, small communities, large communities, but they all have one thing in common, and that is connection. It's connection. I'm going to tell you a little story. Back in the early 1950s, my dad and mom bought their first home, and it was post-Korea conflict time, and so it was the typical square cracker box type track home. But for us, that was huge. We had been living in apartments and on base because my dad was in the service. So this was exciting, and it was a little town that was just being developed outside of Chicago. And it was called Niles, Illinois. So it was 5 blocks in a row, and they all ran parallel. And we moved into our house, and then somebody else moved into theirs, and pretty soon our whole block got filled up. And we started to create a little community. And the women started to help people with other ladies with their children, or going to the store, or watching each children's babysitting. And then the men decided that they would get a volleyball net. And so they put in the volleyball post in our grass and across the street in the other person's grass. And at night when they came home from work and after dinner, they'd put up the net and they'd play volleyball all evening. And the women would come out and have their lemonade. Remember, this is the 50s. Nobody sat out there with wine. It was lemonade. And they would cheer them on, and it was a fabulous little gathering. And that became a community within our community. And the men connected. They shared. It was also a part of being influencing and in being influenced. They would share ideas, possibly share new jobs. It was really amazing to watch that. So I was in a community Thursday night here in the Serenity Prayer class. There were 9 or 10 of us, and we didn't know all each other. And when we sat there, by the end of the evening, we were connected. We shared. So the magic in community for me is being accepted. When someone feels accepted, that helps them, their self-esteem, their self-confidence, sharing in safety. Ideas come forth. How about just teamwork, helping each other? And I'd ask that great philosopher, Amy Tunnerman. Are you here, Amy? Raise your hand. She's 13 years old, but she's my great philosopher of Newbury Park. So I said to her, what does community mean to you? And she said, teamwork. I like that. I said, what is one word that would be magical? And she said, kindness. So I want to leave you with that. our community, I think everyone here comes from kindness. Thank you. Namaste.
Oh, wow. Thanks again, Joyce. Thank you so much for being here and just for the big role you play in my life. I love you, and you're a really important part of my life, and so I so appreciate your being here and just in every way that we participate together and share our lives. So, right back to Alberto for our next song and then into our Sunday talk.
So the next song is The Water is Wide by James Taylor. Actually, the song was not written by James Taylor. The song is an old 17th century Scottish song. And it's about love, and it's about the distance between two lovers, and that's represented by the water. It's wide. Now, as you know, Irish people started traveling, especially here to the States, early in the 17th century. And scholars suspect that this is a song written by a woman that lamented the distance from her lover who came to the States. Now that's one possibility. But there are many meanings to this song, but the unity meaning and the love is really the main one. So here we go with The Water is Wide. The water is wide, I can cross over, and neither have high wings to fly. Build me a boat that can carry two, and both shall row. Love and I. There is a ship, and she sails the sea. She's loaded deep, as deep can be, not so deep as the love I'm in. I know not how I sink or swim. Love is handsome, and love is fine. and bold that can carry two, and both shall grow overnight, and both shall grow overnight. Thank you.
I am suddenly doubly jealous, Alberto, because you play and sing, and I've made this comment before, but I think that perhaps the musical abilities could have been apportioned in a little more fair manner. I think I was absent on the day those were handed out. But anyway, thanks so much for being here. And just, I know you've been a great support to this center. And thanks for being here and just for sharing all of that with all of us. Thanks a bunch. He is magical. And so, I'm going to talk a little bit today, certainly about that song. But do you guys know that song? Do you remember it? The Water is Wide. Are you familiar with that? Recorded certainly by James Taylor, among many, many, many others. And what I think is so interesting about that song is Alberto referenced from the 1700s, perhaps, hundreds of years old, and yet every musical artist between then and now has covered that. Just about. It's still being covered and recorded all the way to our very modern day. And so, gorgeous, gorgeous song. And so if you don't know that, some of the lyrics say this. It says, "The water is wide, I can't cross over. And neither have I wings to fly." And so, as Alberto referenced, it sounds in a way like a song which calls to the adventurous spirit of the human being. Like, I want to sail across or fly across or make my way across this wide body of water, and yet somehow I lack that ability. And yet, the song is not really one about an adventurous spirit or even one about travel. It is, as Alberto stated, a song about distance. And that distance can certainly be viewed as the wide water. It could be viewed as a swath of land, or in the context of my talk today, that wide water can be viewed as anything that stands between you and I. Anything that stands between us, that separates us, including water and land and things less tangible like thoughts and beliefs and attitudes about ourselves, about others, about situations and events and that sort of thing. And so that is the context of this song for today's message, is that idea of what is it that stands between us, that leaves you on one side of the wide water and leaves me on the other. What are those things that then leave us living our lives in distance, living our lives in isolation or in separation from one another? And I will say that if COVID-19 did anything for us, it really laid out in very real terms, in real-world evidence, the effects, the results of living in isolation, of living in separation. And I don't know if you guys happen to, if you watch the news or catch that on TV or follow things on the internet or any of that sort of stuff. But if you do, and if you did, over the course of the pandemic, over the course of the shutdowns and the lockdowns and the encouraging advice to hunker down and stay at home and isolate and all those kinds of things, a very real outcome of that is depression. And it was relayed on the evening news again and again that the depression, which resulted as the evidence of isolation and separating ourselves and not being together, not communing, resulted in increases in crime, increases in violence, increases, in fact, in things like suicide, people taking their own lives, a very real outcome caused by depression from isolating and separating ourselves from one another. And so while COVID-19 sort of spells that out for us, I think in a broader sense, this same idea translates to our world and to our lives in that you probably don't have to look very far in the world to notice those same effects from depression. And yet in this way, I'm not referring to COVID-19. I'm referring to the ways in which humanity has separated itself one from another, has isolated itself, has become somehow more interested sometimes in an internet connection than in a human connection, in a human bonding, in togetherness and brotherhood and fellowship. And that very concept comprises much of the work of one of my really go-to spiritual leaders, my favorite author for sure, and this man did pass away about a decade ago, but he has a huge body of work dealing with certainly spiritual concepts, but he was also a brilliant scientist and PhD in physics and just a huge, huge history of work and of everything he did over the course of decades of his career. And his name is Dr. David Hawkins. And I hear gasps all of a sudden for Dr. David. And so some people know who he is, apparently. Dr. David Hawkins does have, I couldn't tell you how many books he wrote, but the best known, I think, is probably a book called Power versus Force. And in this book, he outlines this very idea about what our distance from one another has done to us as people, as human beings, as a society. And much of his work, he studied this looking directly at the effects of our sort of newfound reliance on technology. And he understood and discovered and uncovered the very fact that the more time we spend in front of a device, whether that is a phone or a computer screen, a laptop, the more time we spend interfacing like that has a direct impact on us personally, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, because then the less time we spend interfacing with one another, the less time we spend in time together like this, in seeing one another, in sitting and being together and sharing and understanding and talking and that sort of thing. And so this, in his view, had also very real world implications. I'm going to share in a moment with you a quote from Dr. David Hawkins. And I'm going to tell you, I'm just going to preface it. It's a little bit heavy, It's a little bit heavy, this quote. However, I think it is incredibly important what he is talking about and the information he lays out. And what he is laying out is the dramatic effect of depression, what it does to us as people, as society, as a world, and that it, in fact, is not just, we're sort of lethargic and lackadaisical or something like that, but that it, in fact, is, or at least can be, lethal. And so, Dr. David Hawkins says this. His take is that subtle grades of depression kill more people than all the other illnesses of mankind combined. And he goes on to tell us that there is no antidepressant which will cure a depression which is spiritually based. Because, as he says, the malaise does not come from brain dysfunction. It does not originate from brain dysfunction, but it comes from an accurate response to the desecration of life. Wow, that is powerful. And it is heavy, and I understand that, but I really want to share that because I think it is of such great importance. And so what he talks about, this idea, the desecration of life, we certainly see playing out, in our world, that sort of thing. But on a personal level, just on a personal basis, each of us, he relays this very idea that the quest for, the desire for togetherness, the desire for connection, the desire for us to commune, to be together, to share our lives and to learn from one another and to grow with one another is inherent within us. And that when we deny that, when we lay that to rest, when we repress it or suppress it or do whatever we can to keep that at bay, it is a desecration of the very life force which inhabits us. That presence of God which wants to come out and live and move and have its being by means of us is then thwarted, is shoved down, and it desecrates that life force. And that is what we see playing out so very often in the world today. And so, yes, it is a heavy subject, it's a heavy topic, and I understand that, but the greater question is, if this is true and this is accurate and this is what's going on, then how do we address it? What can we do that might give us different outcomes in our lives? How do we go about that? How do we move on from this deep funk or depression, which we talk about so often and we see in the news and all those things? How do we move on to that into something more positive? And so, my talk title today is The Magic of Community. And so this very idea of community and the magic thereof is the idea that when we focus on, when we turn to community, when we live in that way, focusing on the idea of togetherness, of being together, of sharing, of sisterhood and brotherhood, and living in that way, that there is a magic that comes from that is, in fact, the antidote for what we see going on in the world. It is, in fact, the cure for that which ails us sometimes. And so that's the idea of my talk today. And so I will just tell you, I've shared before that I grew up in small town Oklahoma. And I'm going to tell you again, so you know I'm sticking to my story. Little town of about 3,000 people where I grew up. And we lived out in the country, so we were really city folks, in that big 3,000 person town. But I grew up there from the time I was a baby until, I don't know, I left in whatever it was, 1989 or 90, something like that. And this little town, backwards in so very many ways, and behind the times in so very many ways, did something right, in my view, in the way of community and in the way of sharing and togetherness. And some of the experiences I had there and that I remember from there, I think, are a real testament to that. And they really serve as fodder for us understanding and learning about community and being together. And one of the things I remember so very well there is something that happens as the result of somebody in our community dying. Because when there is a death there in our little community, the homes of the surviving family members just magically filled with food. There was this way of understanding that in the face of someone passing away, that there is a lot to do. There is a lot of details to handle, arrangements to be made. It is a very stressful and upsetting time for the surviving members of a family. And so as a community, we came together and filled their homes with food. And I'm telling you, this is a level of food that would last days or weeks maybe. And yet I have offered that in Las Vegas when I lived there. I've offered it living here, and I've had this response occasionally where, like, people have never heard of that, and so I understand it's not necessarily done everywhere, but it was something that made a really big impression on me, that level of kindness, as Amy said, that level of kindness and sharing and supporting one another. There's also this thing that happens at the funeral. And so the funeral's held at, a church, or we did have a funeral home, a funeral parlor, one in town, and it would sometimes be there. But then at the end of that, when there's this funeral procession going to the cemetery, unlike anywhere else I've ever seen, and I understand there are places that this is law, but in that little hometown where I lived, there was an honoring of that. It was as if the seas parted for a funeral procession. People pulled to either side of the road and parked their cars, no matter how long or short this procession was. People did that as a show of respect, as a sign of respect for whomever passed away, and in support of the members of that processional, so that it wasn't stop and go, so that the entire processional, for instance, could end up at the cemetery sort of at the same time. So it wasn't a few cars and then a few more and that sort of thing, and that may happen some places, but there are many, many, many places that is certainly not as dramatic an effect as I saw that in my little hometown. And there were two gentlemen that lived in our town. I knew them my entire life, and when I was a teenager, they were grown men, and they were the Sapp brothers. They were brothers. They were the Sapp brothers, S-A-P-P. Their last name was Sapp, and Howard and David Sapp were their names. And I don't ever recall seeing one of them without the other. They went everywhere together. They walked from end to end and around our town and into businesses and greeted people and said hi. They were always together, never ever apart. And my understanding is that while they were grown men well into their adulthood, they still lived at home with their parents, who were much, much older, because Howard and David had issues. They, in today's In today's language, I suspect that they would be found somewhere on the autism spectrum. And yet they were these beautiful, wonderful, kind souls. And it was learned in this little hometown, which can be how little towns are, and the word travels fast sometimes. But it was understood at one point that Howard and David, while they lived at home and there were adults in their household, sort of adult supervision in their household, that their parents were much, much older, and in fact at a stage of life where they were sort of worn out and worn down. First of all, from their sheer age, and then from decades of caring for their sons at a really, really high level of care that was required, and yet which they were no longer fully capable of performing. I'm going to get emotional about this, but there's something so beautiful about that little hometown of mine in understanding what was going on in the lives of the Sapp brothers. All the owners of restaurants or eateries or diners anywhere that served food in our little hometown, in those days there were many. Today, not so many. But in those days, there were a lot of restaurants and little diners where one could go in. And all of the owners and operators of those came together and agreed that Howard and David could come in anytime they so chose and sit down and be served a meal or a sandwich and a drink or whatever it is they chose to order. And they could do that anytime they wanted, and it would be free of charge. And I think there's something so incredibly beautiful in that, because here were two men that would not fit in everywhere. They would not have been included and welcomed and honored everywhere. There were communities and towns where something like this might not happen. And so to see business owners come together and offer this invitation to these members of our community simply because they wanted to know that they were cared for, they wanted to know that they were taken care of and that they were okay, that they were eating, that they could eat, that life was okay for them. And I'm still stunned by that, and I think it's so incredibly beautiful. And so I will say that I learned a great deal about community and togetherness and sharing from that little hometown of mine. And one of the things I learned there is that community almost always centers around food. Almost always, at least in our community it did. And so if you are looking to cut carbs or otherwise drop a pound or two, I would suggest make sure nobody dies, because that house will be filled with food from top to bottom, that's for sure. On the other hand, if maybe you're in need of a meal, you might just consider getting in that funeral procession, because it may take a while. You may have to go hang out at the cemetery for a moment or two. But I promise you it will wind its way and end up somewhere with food. It will end up at food without any question. And then I learned from my experience with Howard and David Sapp the very idea of community, the very idea of sharing, the very idea of giving and supporting and being together, because that, in my mind, is this incredible example of togetherness. Howard and David could go in any restaurant and have a meal, makes a mark on my heart that I can't really fully explain. But therein lies the magic of community. Therein lies the difference that we can make in the lives of other people, in our own lives. Do you imagine that filled the heart of the business owners who said yes to that? It might have filled the bellies of Howard and David, but you know that filled the hearts of other people. And so to witness that and to see that is a marvelous thing. And so what I understand about community is that it's not necessarily about the town I live in or that I come from or, this particular town or jurisdiction or municipality. It is something much deeper and broader than that. It is this very idea of belonging. And so, yes, I may belong to a town or in a town or, a certain area. Those things are true. But the deeper level of belonging that I'm talking about is not simply that we belong to a community. It is that we are community. We belong in a way to each other. And the magic of community means when we live community at that level, when we take responsibility for one another at that level, when we understand that, yes, we are in a community, but we belong to each other. Have you ever had a point in your life that it would have done you a world of good to know that you mattered to someone? Have you ever been in a place in your life where it would have filled your heart to know that you are important to someone? That is what we can do with this level of community, with this level of ownership, with the knowledge that, in fact, yes, we belong, but at a deeper level, we belong to each other. And so I'll just leave you with this. This very idea has incredible ramifications, not only spiritually, but personally, individually, and for our world. And if we will live community in this way, the bonus, the benefit, the payoff, the result of living in this way is that antidote to the depression that this world suffers from. It is the cure for that which currently ails much of humanity, and it is the acknowledgement and the idea that regardless of the width of the water, regardless of what it is that stands between us, we will never allow that to keep us apart. Happy Sunday, everybody. Much love. Thank you so much for being here. All right, we are going to do our offertory. And again, I will ask, please, as you support this center, however you do that, financially, with time, with talent, however you do that, please make it a matter of the heart. Let's do this affirmation together, if you will. Before reaching into my pocket, I look into my heart. I see a life that is rich in so many blessed ways. It is my heart's great desire to share with others the good that has been so generously given me. In so doing, my efforts and impact are magnified, and the world is infused with a greater sense of giving. And so it is. All right, my friends, you have heard about him, and here he is in person, right here in real time. The man, the myth, our very own religious science practitioner, Mr. Buzz Noe. Talk to you a little bit about what's going on at the center.
Thank you, Reverend Kelly. All right. Thank you all for being here. His lesson today brought up a joke I had to share with you. Two people are walking on both sides of the river in Austin, Texas. And the one yells over, "Hey, how do I get to the other side?" The other one yells back, "You're already on the other side." So I want to thank you all again for being here. Last Sunday of September, Reverend Kelly's lesson, The Magic of Community, was a great message to allow us all to better connect with each other in this world as humans. I'm Buzz. I'm here to present to you announcements. So once again, right after our service at around noon, we will offer a live spiritual treatment over in room 4. Our practitioner that will be there for you is Pamela Bailey. She'll be ready to treat for anyone who has anything going on in your life that's causing stress, anxiety, depression, anything like that. She'll also allow you to be better connected with the divine perfection that we all know is there for us. Okay, also happening again this week on Wednesday, September 28th, 10 to noon. Our wonderful spiritual practitioner, Director Reverend Kelly, will lead a review and discussion of today's lesson and how you can more directly apply it to your lives. There's no fee, and he'll be here for all of you, and he'll soon to tell you a little bit more about that event coming up. And please do continue to donate to our center, which allows us to remain here for you. We've already passed around the collection trays. Thank you for everyone who did donate, and you can also always donate online through our website, through PayPal or Zelle. So thanks for everything that you give. And yes, we want to remind you that our Spiritual Energy Fair is coming up next month on Saturday, October 29th. We'll have some sessions most of the day that'll be here with readers, psychics, healers, probably practitioners, who will all assist you in revealing your divine perfection. So more information on this will be coming up soon in October. And Reverend Kelly's new class, which opened up on Thursday last week, will continue to run through October 29th. It's coming up this Thursday is the last day that you can attend and sign up for the class, but you can still do that, so please put it on your calendar. The cost of the entire class is just $65, so please do join us there. And just a reminder that our website is always here for you. If you want to learn about the events that are going on, anything else happening in the center, go to the website. It's always there for you. And finally, last week we began our new autumn season. Let's have love be life's main reason. Okay, that ends the announcements. Thanks you all for being here. Up next is Reverend Kelly to tell you more about what's coming up. Thank you.
Thanks, Buzz. Thank you, thank you. I would just say we had a great time at that class Thursday night. I thought it was lovely and wonderful and beautiful. This Thursday will be the last opportunity to join that class if you are so inclined. And I want to just share a little bit about what we call spiritual mind treatment, affirmative prayer. Many or most of you may have been through that process before or have received treatment or affirmative prayer. I have been approached occasionally about what is it, what does it mean, why would I do that, that sort of thing. So I want to read something to you that I found recently, and I think it is just a stunning description of what affirmative prayer is all about. And it says that when all mankind comes into the consciousness of its true identity, there will be no wars, no competition, no strife. As we gain the full consciousness of our true identity, it shines through us at a greater sense of harmony, health, and success, and one by one we attract others who are seeking the same way. Any belief that that which we are seeking is anywhere but within us, within our very own consciousness, is the barrier separating us in belief from our harmony. True prayer is never addressed to a being outside ourselves. True prayer expects nothing from outside our own being. The kingdom of God is within you. And so I notice occasionally that finding that kingdom of God within myself is not always a no-brainer. And so why would I go to a practitioner for that? for assistance in finding that kingdom of God and for coming to a better realization of one's own true identity. All right? All right, so Pamela will be in room 4. Anybody so inclined. Alberto is going to close us out with music, and he's going to sing us home, or play us home. Not sing. Play us home right here and right now. Much love, everybody.
So here we go. The spirit of community. Well, Scarborough Fair, any fair, it's just about community. It's about getting together. It's about food vendors. As Reverend Kelly appropriately pointed out, and it's about togetherness. But maybe not many people know that Scarborough Fair really existed only for 400 years, from the mid 13th century until the mid 17th century, and then it was canceled for political reasons, but that's another story. But and not everybody knows probably that the famous line parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme has a meaning. It's not just a concoction of herbs. Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme were 4 herbs that in medieval times, just when the Scarborough Fair was happening, were symbols. And parsley was the symbol of spirituality. Sage was the symbol of strength. And rosemary and thyme were the faithfulness and the love and the strength of love. So these 4 elements really talk about being noble. That's what during the medieval times was defined. A noble person was not just a person with money, as we think of today. A nobleman or a noblewoman, somebody who has importance and a lot of money. Not back then. Noble was somebody who had these 4 attributes of courage, faithfulness, strength, and spiritual, being a spiritual being. So here we go with the Scarborough Fair.
Thanks again, Alberto. Thanks all the time. Everybody, much love. Happy Sunday. Enjoy your week. I will be here 4 to 6 on Wednesday for anybody who wants to stop by. Thursday night for class. Next Sunday again. Much love, everybody. Bye.